Thanks, Kim. Well, hello and welcome everybody. Thanks for having me today. As Kim said, most of my experience and my passion is lied in all of the underground mines, underground history, and so my first attempt to bring everything above ground and compile it. That's what my intent of my presentation is today, everything that I went through and how I was able to put it together. And I compiled just the mine history of the Neptune. That was the one that was specific to me in my house. And compile a report, have it reviewed, beat up a little bit, and turn back to Kim. And other people, if they research the Neptune mine, they come up to Kim, I'll have the bulk of the work done for them. And that's what I hope I'd encourage other people to do. If you hear not a whole lot to do in Butte, but you sure could research history while you're drinking.
that will keep you drunk for all of our history.
And I'm used to having 2 screens of my notes, so I have 3, but only 1 set of notes, so I apologize. And Kim, I wasn't paying attention when you said about the laser pointer, but this will be fine.
The laser, it's the little star button?
The one that says laser on it?
Yeah, the one that, there you go. And if you, the arrow that points down towards you will make it advance. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so before I click through all the little words on the screen, this is a picture of a picture. This is the 1910 panoramic at the Mining Museum. As you're walking out of the gift shop into the grounds, it's off your right. That number there would tell you that that is the McKinley School. So that is Park Street right there. So if you come north, you know that's Broadway and that's Granite. That's one of the first things I noticed was this significant drainage that went through there. That bridge 12, 15 feet tall, so that's no longer there. That's filled in with anything with probably good dirt. So the main branch of Missoula Gulch is over here, coming down this way. So the bulk of my research occurs here at this disruption. This was the dumps of the Neptune mine that operated for nearly 20 years, 1870s to 1890s. The claim stretched from over here. This is close to Silver and Clark Street intersection, and it stretches clear down over here to the Diamond Street. This is Driscoll Drug, and the building still stands today with some horse stables behind it. This house here is still in the corner of Silver and Excelsior. This is this brick building. Several of these houses still stand on Excelsior. Girard, which my house at the corner of Diamond and Girard, is right down this way nowadays. Sorry, stepping away from my notes here. So throughout, before you can start any of this, you really have to have some spark interest. If you don't have any, then obviously you're not going to do the research. That's a question I get a lot. How do you do it? I have no other explanations. You either have that fire in your belly or you don't. Mm-hmm. And eventually it comes for eyes for detail. I've looked through a lot of this stuff, and I'll find a lot of discrepancies. Things won't add up. A couple of them that I guess are the exact same. The 2 different documents are same exact, but I have a third one here that I think is mostly right. After some research and looking at a few more maps, I was able to, I guess, prove just that. Lay everything over. That's the fanciest this presentation gets. I'm not a Photoshop guy, but it took me forever. And we'll talk about the resources and tools that I've used. As Kim mentioned, I've been involved with my museum for years, of course. You see a lot of pictures from them. I spent days and hours up here with Kim bugging her, help me, help me, help me. That's at the courthouse, the land records office. A friend of mine, a fellow musician, he's a surveyor, public land surveyor. He helps me out quite a bit. And of course, the Bureau for all of Underground Mining History to make sure I didn't have any workings underneath my house or that we're aware of. Oh, and lastly, how I compiled everything. Excuse me, I mentioned the Neptune report and who I gave it off to review to make sure that I was right. I was always looking for somebody to beat up on it to make sure I was right, but I lucked out this go around and nobody really could. So I put together the text for review and eventually onto a presentation, so if anybody else gets as interested as I do, maybe you could be up here too teaching us. Mm-hmm. So I guess for the spark interest, how to get everybody, or see if I can't get you interested, this is an aerial of the Lower West Side, Chester Steel Park, and the hospital. Now I'm lost. There's Diamond. Where am I at? There's Diamond. That's Driscoll right there. So everybody from Butte, we all know that we have Gold Street, Silver Street, Galena, mercury, and porphyry. This all makes sense to the minerals, metals found in Butte. But then Diamond Street pops up. Why? Does anybody know? Has nothing to do with diamond mine.
I do. No.
I told you before you can.
You told us already.
I told you can.
Diamond bits.
No?
The geologist answer.
Does anybody know what this is? This is an actual sheet from the abstract of my house, and it has all the land records. That includes the mineral exchanges and the property exchanges. This is a sheet from the Henriette claim. We're going to learn that my house sits on the conflict corner, the Henriette, the Neptune, and the Flagstaff claims. But the Henriette claim in 1879 is claimed by a man named Alice Diamond. So Diamond wasn't a place or a thing, it was a person. How about that? And he seems to be quite the character. I'll point out some other things. We couldn't find a whole lot of information on him other than he had some mail at one point. I live at the corner of Diamond and Girard, so if Diamond was a last name, I guess that meant Girard must have been one too. He and his family had claimed the Flagstaff, and he was mainly the grandfather of a pair of unfortunate twins that have passed away. He was basically given a power of attorney. So a lot of these abstracts or these old records will give you some morbid details that you might not want to know. Sorry, my notes aren't keeping up over here. So at least if you learn one thing a day, we know where Diamond Street came from.
Yeah.
So this is what got me interested. This is the more shots of everything you see here, pictures from my phone and stuff that I own or somebody else owns. This is the abstract of the house. And page 1 will give you the shot here of the actual block itself. I live in lot 4 of block 8 of the Montrose edition. And what we're seeing here, this line here is for the claim of the Neptune mine that stretches clear back over to a silver in Clark Street, as mentioned before. So I have about 30 feet worth of it coming across, and there's 6.5 going north. So, but that not only puts me in the Montrose edition, that puts this property also in the Neptune edition. So every time I was seeing transactions with a separate edition as well. So that's kind of interesting. Sorry, I gotta click in 2 spots, I keep forgetting. So like I said, I mentioned it took me 8 years to finally dig into this stuff. But when I see this, the Neptune claim is really what got me interested in wanting to research more around the house. But then as I got to talking about it, some other people that I've known professionally, a guy that's he's a biologist for us out on the Clark Fork in Silver Bow, come out. It turns out that in the early 90s he had good friends that lived in that house, and he had dinner there. It's the more you talk, the more you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So the first person I went and saw was Tony Roth at the Bureau of Mines and Geology, and I guess I came up here and saw Kim first, and we looked through the stope books and we looked out. We were aware that there were some records of the Neptune, and as I mentioned before, this is Clark Street and this is Silver Street. So does anybody live nearby? But not right there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what this is saying that this shaft is almost in the middle of the intersection. It is in the middle of Clark Street. It's about it went down at least 180 feet, probably a little bit deeper, so they could dewater the thing. The vertical shaft comes horizontal this way. This is most likely another vertical passageway raised that connects this 130 foot and this 180 foot level together. It's most likely that they were mining silver ore in between this 50-foot stretch. They could have started from the 30-foot level and been mining their way towards the surface as well. The Neptune operates between the 1870s and 1890s, so this predates pneumatic drills. They weren't moving rock very fast like they would eventually at the turn of the century. But it was in pretty favorable silver ore from everything that I read. 20 guys working the stopes. The thing operated for 20 years, so they were making quite a bit of money. And then it talks about 2 shafts that operate simultaneously making the same production. So we see this green dot here. The second shaft is in the alleyway, so it ran just as long, produced just as much, so there's probably similar workings off this shaft as well that just weren't documented.
What's that green dot up above?
That's the second shaft. So there's another one in the alley. So does anybody live here?
That wouldn't be up by the Stevens Lode, would it?
Exactly. Stevens Low was the next one to the west. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Stevens sat at the corner of Mercury and Washington. Yeah, but yeah, adjoining lodes, just because they weren't moving rock near as fast as they were in the 1870s, 1890s, they could operate sizably simultaneously that close together. At the Neptune, being that close to Missoula Gulch, it had a lot of struggle with floods and water every time it rained or gully washed, and you spent months dewater the place. So my house, as I mentioned before, makes up 3 of the claims from the Neptune, the Henriette, and the Flagstaff. For me, reading the abstract over and over and over, it's hard to follow and hard to read. I get better at it with practice, but eventually I would find that the Neptune was one mostly produced, and the other 2 were just surface operations, that they wouldn't last very long in comparison. So here's another picture of a picture that I took at the Mining Museum. This sits on the wall, the north wall of the engine room. But this is a vein map from the USGS survey. So we know that every one of these lines here are topography lines that are representing an elevation. So when you get here to the Neptune lode, it was sizable enough that the amount of rock that they moved underground was enough to disrupt the topography lines that some guy on a map recognized it. That was one thing I noticed I thought was interesting. And we were asking about the Stevens lode. This is the vein that they were most likely mining on. And I'll pull up a news article here in a minute that talks about how the Neptune really peters out towards the west when they lose the ledge, and I assume that means because of Missoula Gulch here, and they pick up a little bit on moving west, a little bit a mile further south, but it was at the tail end of the mineralization. Some of the research that I've done in newspapers.com or with Kim would bring up things like this, and just I mentioned it's going to explain that the ore was good, but the further west you got, you'd lose it. Just to give you a little bit of perspective as well, this little dot here would eventually be Driscoll Drug, so Diamond Street takes off this way. So one afternoon, my girlfriend and I were walking from the house to the library, Cilantro. And the person, somebody had just bought the house at the corner of Clark and Silver, and they're doing some pretty good remodeling outside, but it also included an excavation. I don't know if it was sewer or water, but there was a pile of rocks that was outside. So me being eyes for detail, I walked by and I got a couple of chunks of ore. So that black staining in Butte using manganese, pyrolusite ores and manganese oxide. So I'm 99% certain that I walked away with a couple pieces of the Neptune ore just from doing this research. That's cool. I took it to the bar with me. And all the research, like there's what, it's 1885. There are all sorts of articles where they were hitting really extensive silver, native silver, wire silver. A lot of it was on, I think this one was on display. A sizable mine. It was eventually purchased by Clark. Well, it was eventually defaulted to Clark when they couldn't pay the loans. The Henriette claim was eventually bought by Largy, so it's cool in I thought another interesting thing in my house sits on claims owned by Clark and Largy. Some people call him the fourth Copper King, but you've heard that about 3 or 4 other individuals as well. So more eyes for detail. We're going to see here. This was the 1884 bird's eye map that most people should be familiar with, the hand-drawn thing.
It's right behind the screen if anybody wants to look afterwards.
This is Park Street, comes across where it crosses Missoula Gulch. This is Jackson Street, the original plat of Butte. The furthest west street was Jackson. Mercury, silver, eventually diamond, and here is Galena. I don't think you can see it very well here, but all 3 of these buildings here were labeled number 80, and they were listed as the Stevens Mine, right at the corner of Mercury and Jackson. But it would lead you to believe that this structure was also part of the Stevens, this one as well. The more I kept looking at the Neptune, everything we've seen thus far starts to make you believe that it's probably not. Sort of reached out to Dick Gibson at one point. You know, look at his blog and some of the questions they had. He predicted or figured that this was taken somewhere near Porphyry Street. Come to find out, he was 100% right. You can see the cuts here for their plaster mining. A hose was coming down the hill where they're squirting their water back up. Presumably we were looking northeast. One more bird's eye view was this one, 1890. Now we've expanded from Jackson Street to Crystal Street, and this mine is now listed as the Neptune, where we can see the two shafts are operating together. The Stevens mine is now just a lonely structure under a mine dump. I think it's come to fire at one point. But now I put all three of them together. I was pretty sure that I had the locations, whatever this little thing is. But I'm almost certain that's Neptune with the three peaks I can count was there. I can find these two structures. This long thing coming down towards Missoula Gulch, you can see something similar. And of course, the Stevens mine, if you could see at the top of the hill there, it was a sizable structure. And you can put them all back together. So now we don't have a guess of where this picture is. We know that it was on Porphyry Street, looking northeast, and you can see the Neptune mine in it.
They hydraulic that?
The whole Missoula Gulch.
Missoula Gulch, was it plastered or hydraulic?
I think I thought the terms went hand in hand mostly. They would hydraulic it away, then bucket everything down to their sluices here. And yeah, that's the way my understanding is. Plaster was just surface. And could be mistaken though. In another, we're talking more about mistakes that, well, we saw the one about the Neptune mine, or the Stevens mine, excuse me, being listed as all three. Here's another one I found. Another picture of a picture. This one sits on the east wall of the engine room. As we were talking about the Stevens mine before, I mentioned that it's at the corner of Washington and Washington and Jackson Street. This is Galena. Sorry, my fancy stuff took the street names away. But Galena, Mercury, Silver. This map is trying to show at the corner of Silver and Jackson. It should be blocked north here. As depicted by the Stoke books, which we found here at the archives, Washington Street, this should be Mercury and Silver, comes down to, sorry, this is Washington, Jackson, and this is your Stevens mine here. So not everything is always correct. Any questions so far about the mining stuff?
Wait, which one is more correct?
The Stoke books.
The one over here, the
Yeah, I'm
Sanborn?
sorry I got them twisted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, the Sanborn maps. Correct. Yeah, Sanborn maps. And whatever I have, this is referenced in what I gave you, so, and it's sitting on the wall of the Mining Museum.
Cool.
But it's just interesting that some people get it wrong way back when. And so many times you find it. So this is where I got started. Sorry, went a little bit too far. Really getting interested in the house, because one afternoon, I'll go through the whole story, but I was, after talking with my surveyor friend, I started to energize him a little bit, and one afternoon we met at the library in Cilantro. I can't remember. He brings me up the plat of the Montrose edition where I live. We're way over here, lot 4, block 8 of the Montrose edition. The three claims I've been talking about, here's the Henriette. These things were sizable, about 300 feet by 1,200 feet. The Neptune come in from over by Silver Street, and here's the flagstaff underneath. The difference between the dashed lines and the dotted lines. The dashed lines have the precedent over the mining claim itself. The dashed lines were after. The reason for the dashed lines, if you see the earlier claims in Butte, you see a lot of dead space. They call them government lots. And like I mentioned before, in the 1880s, 1890s, you're not moving dirt like they are today with these huge trucks. You could claim out 1,200 feet, overlap your claims, you're most likely not going to be mining on somebody. So this is how they got rid of these weird empty lots that the government would eventually have to deal with, or government lots. So these claims overlap instead. What's interesting to me about the Flagstaff and the Henriette, I'm almost certain that they were mining the Henriette right here on the edge of Girard Street, where I can almost still see it. Sorry, trying to operate two computers. Zoom back into what I found in my abstract. one afternoon I'm sitting around and get to looking at these distances, 6.5 feet and 4.5 feet, and I think, well, I can go out with the tape measure and find that thing. So I go to the curb and I pull the 4.5 feet and 6.5 feet, and I throw a rock on it. And I sent the picture to Chad, and I said, my surveyor friend, I said, look, man, I found it. And he's sharp as a tack, he's good, and he goes, I think you need to go about 6 feet south, because you don't own from the curb, you most likely own from the plant. So I think, all right, I get out my click wheel, you know, it's you roll on the ground, 1 foot a click. I have my property pin here, I'm aware of, and I come over the 35, 55 feet, then up 100, and yeah, he was right. It was right on the right on the edge of the planter. You can see my click wheel handle right there. Come back and pull tape, and my girlfriend, she can't see it very well, but she has an annual shrub. It couldn't have been any closer to the corner than Neptune, just by chance. I thought that was kind of neat. More on to the Lower West Side. So this is the same bird's eye view we saw before from 1890. Gerard Avenue, Porphyry Street, and Gold Street. Oh, that's what I forgot to do. Excuse me, back up. I've been saying that my house is at 912 West Diamond right here, but you see the name of the street. And also what we know is Emmett and Western aren't anywhere close either. So when you're able to look at these, when the subdivisions were coming together, where they started from the east side by the hospital, working their way west, they were quartering more towards the south, and when they started the Lower West Side, we're going more east. If they continued on their straight path, they wouldn't have met up. So I think the next addition beneath the Montrose, where Gold Street shows up, is where everything shifts south. Diamond Street pokes up in the middle of it, and everything else from east can continue on.
So Logan, that the map you showed beforehand, Porphyry becomes Diamond?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And even the abstract way back when everything's talking about from Porphyry Street to Porphyry Street, it's I think that occurred quite a bit in Butte. The more I stare at this thing, I have this one hanging up in my dining room because this is where the first time the Lower West Side shows up, the Montrose edition. But this map here leads you to believe it's a nice neighborhood. They're trying to depict trolley lines coming down Girard and across Silver and down, I think this is Western now, what? Is that Emmett Western? Then we go, this is 1890, and then we take a look back at the picture 1810. This is where Girard is supposed to be in that trolley line 20 years before. So out of all these bird's eye view, this isn't some depiction, it's an ad. And if you look, there's 3 of them, 1884, 1890, and 1910, I think. The 2 outside ones were driven by the same company. This was some outside thing, an ad moved to Butte. Look at how muddy those streets are. You expect that you'd be able to cross. Yes. All that drainage coming through. I give you a little bit more perspective. Here's Driscoll again, and the stables behind my house sits here, where I mentioned where I thought that they were mining the Henriette claim on the edge of Girard. It's because of this sudden cliff right here. I'm almost certain that that's where they're mining. And this is kind of a knob that comes out towards the south. I think that Flagstaff claim is probably mining their ledge towards the north. But it all looks a lot different today. I'm still waiting for that trolley line to come down Girard. Well, that's Girard right there. That's where my house sits. Driscoll's still there. This house made it in that 1910 photograph along with this brick building.
Logan, would you go back one? Or just
So how did they fill in? I mean, that's a pretty significant gulch.
Phil, that's what I was wondering.
Do you ever wonder why, how much earth they moved in Butte, right, those underground mines? Do you ever look uptown and wonder what happened to them? Well, I don't see it.
Yeah.
Is it filled in drainages in Missoula Gulch? So this is Missoula Gulch here. This is, I guess, the west fork of Missoula Gulch.
Oh,
And it went 3 or 4, all of the significant portion, all the mine dumps in Butte are in those drainages.
I just wonder where the hospital is in those older pictures. It really looks like there's a lot steeper slope there than Chesterfield Park slope, but I don't know.
Yeah.
They fill that in with a lot of fill from the Alice,
Oh, okay.
and the fill from the Syndicate.
That makes sense.
That
That's
was Missoula
all,
Gulch. They trucked it down, yeah.
all the way down through. Yeah, that makes sense to me. That's a lot of free dirt, right?
Yeah.
No matter how much acid it drains. At the end, Joe, I'll go back to the one that kind of spits together, and
Okay.
it'll be a bit closer and see how it all comes together. But I guess I knew it was all mined up. They filled it with. And I've seen pictures of them putting Missoula Gulch in a pipe. I mean, it's like 40 feet down there. It's a significant amount of fill.
When they built St. James and the Anaconda Company built the hospital, they fill that Missoula Gulch in with clean fill that they transported to fill that.
Clean.
They also put that sewer in at the same time. The city and the Anaconda Company had an agreement, and they put that storm drain underneath Chesterfield Park all the way through and connected it up above, and then they filled that in with that clean material that they provided.
That clean material kept me employed for a
Yeah,
decade.
exactly.
Yeah, nice gentle slopes for your sleigh riding now.
Yeah. Same way up above in the Cinders ballpark,
Yeah.
they filled a lot of that in that Bernard edition. They filled a lot of that in with the material that burned uptown when they had those major fires.
Oh, okay.
So they filled. That's where they got the name the Cinders. So they
Makes
filled that with a lot of waste material.
And when if you're walking on the west edge of Alabama, and you turn back and look to the east of the Cinders, like you're saying, where one of those dugouts sits, you can see the shape of the mine dump from the Neptune still. It's
Oh, cool.
plain as day,
Yeah.
but it has grass on it now. But I could probably find some, I guess, some other treasures in there now. And it finally brings us to my place here at 912 West Diamond. It's hard for me to pinpoint some of these old pictures, but find them here at the archives. It's again pictures of pictures. Catch you up on this one. So I really don't, I'm not quite sure the years of the first two. It's going to be between 1918 and 1928 from what I can pinpoint from the Sanborn maps. The other one here is from the 1959 tax record, and there's the Diamonds for Diamond Street. This is one that I took. My neighbors like to park in front of my house. I don't run a used car lot. My one of the significant things that I noticed about this place is this, what I presume to be an addition here, where these pillars like to come up and hold everything up. You can notice them here. Until I started doing this research, I was convinced that this was the entryway. At some point, they had just built this addition, but no record can I find that the address was ever on Girard Street. I think it was a mistake by the builders. I think when they showed up, or somebody, the foreman said, well, you're putting the entrance on the wrong side. It needs to be on the north and not the west. So they built this in the 20s or the teens when the house was built. And I was the first one, the porch has a pitch to it. I was the first one to level the floor in about 2015. So better late than never. And where I don't have any eaves coming off, that plays into my story later on too. So when I was talking about the mistake entryway, that is what it looks like from the inside. It's pretty significant for a bedroom, I'd say. But not robust enough that it would be an exterior door, in my opinion. But once again, the Diamonds for Diamond Street. Interesting, right? Remember I told you the house is built on porphyry? And one of the significant contributions I put to the place in the basin is my little home studio that I have way too much money invested in. But I call it the Neptune Studio, and now everybody knows why I call it the Neptune Studio. And now we're moving on to where Kim helped me out with the archives, and we started to search the address, and it's interesting that who lived here at this time. This is from 1915. All the records say the house was built in 1920, so that's a discrepancy that I have. And if you want to rent one on Porphyry Street, you have to come to Diamond Street. But I don't think that, yeah, that's... And here you can rent it. Diamond's my house itself, and this was another indication back in 1919 that it was always been a 4-bedroom place, not a 3 bedrooms. Once again, it was a mistake by the contractor, not an addition somebody did in the 50s. I put this one in for Kim. She liked that sentence right there. This is Mr. John DeShano. He owned the house for I think he was the first owner. He owned it from the 20s until the 50s, but he'll sacrifice his car for a $525. Would you put it as people still speak that way today?
Yeah.
And my dad, he was big into genealogy, the family research, but his dad didn't like it. He said, you're going to find something that you don't want to know. And so Kim and I were doing more research. Here we come across this right here, the John DeShano. He was called by death in the family home at 912 West Diamond. So now I know somebody dies in my living room. Nice. I talked to one of my good friends. Well, I think I hear that guy come home every now and then. But talked to one of my good friends, Brian Walsh. He's a Walsh that's not related to every other Walsh in Butte, but he was raised Irish Catholic, and he reminds me, he said, man, when people died, they put you on show at your house for 3 days, and you likely died inside your house, and probably every house in uptown Butte, new or old, somebody's probably died in it, and there's been viewings. So my grandpa was right. Sometimes you find things you don't want to know. And I mentioned before that addition, they didn't build eaves off the roof, they built the wall right to it. So now it's not attached to the attic, I don't get the outside airflow. When it thaws and freezes, I like to get ice dams, and I have dealt with redoing drywall, walls, and ceilings to where I put in this $4,000 heat wire, and you can see all that nice electrical tape I paid $4,000 for. But I didn't have an outlet on the outside of the house, so my uncle, that was a retired electrician, he had to come help me. We're aware that the outside was stucco, which why anybody's stucco in a house in Butte, Montana is beyond me. We knew that he was going to be dealing with having to drill through some sort of cement mortar and on the other side wood. So when he shows up and start drilling, we found metal, and 1/2-inch thick metal on those walls. And later on, up here doing research with Kim, once again the Sanborn maps, there it is, 912 West Diamond. That says plastered on metal lath. So even though it was a hindsight thing for me, if I would have went up here and took a look before, then I would have known.
You would have known.
It showed it a couple bits, but it had to be 1/4-inch, 1/2-inch thick lath going through that stuff. It was impressive. A few notes behind, excuse me. Okay, this brings us to the land records office at the courthouse. So I read more and more in my abstract, and I started to piece together Al was Diamond, and he must have been a character if they named a street after him. Is there anybody else I can find in here? So I go into the courthouse, and they're going to set you up with this big book, and coming down here, it's lot 1, 2, 3, there we are, lot 4. Up here would tell you that was block 8 Montrose edition. So here, the very first owner, we see Marie DeShano. We saw John DeShano was her husband that we have the obituary for. And these numbers here are going to give you the cards. I'll pull up a couple here in a minute. They give you all the details of the transaction itself, but it changes hands from the DeShanos to the Nissens to White, the Johnsons, all the way going forward. This was a mistake here. This should be someplace else. Up to where myself, and my ex-wife purchased the place in July of 2014. And about 5 years later, I met her boyfriend, so she bought the place for me. I kept the dog in 2019. But nice guy, he paid. One of the few times to be a nice guy pays off. She sold me the place back, so now I have the house and the dog. 2 months later, the market blew up. If I bought it for $130, I probably could have sold it for $280.
Wow.
But it's my house, and I'm staying there. So after you piece these numbers together and you go drag even bigger books off the shelves and open it up, this is going to be the first one where Marie DeShano, she sells it to the Nissens in 1965. And somebody told me that if you're good enough to read these tax stamps, you'll know how much they paid for it. But that's beyond my realm. I even asked my surveyor friend, he didn't have a whole lot of idea. And the newest one when I purchased the place back in October of 2019. And there is another set of books that's just not about the properties and land exchanges. but you can get into the handwritten claims. That is the handwritten ledger for the Neptune claim itself. So some of those typewriter images I've been bringing up, the Henriette claim, it is this exact verbiage, but in a typewriter form. And I wish I need to go back and frame that thing, put it up in the house, I guess. And a little bit more interesting history where I gave you some of my too much information about being divorced. If you look back up here in 910 West Diamond, my dad had a second marriage. There he is with his second wife, and they get divorced, and there she has it by herself. So maybe one day somebody's going to be doing research in these same books and see this and see this and wonder what the hell happened. And you just don't have to be limited to the Butte history or neighborhood, the mines. As I mentioned before, my dad was big into genealogy. I haven't got there yet. This is taken from a book that one of my ancestors had written. It's called The Trail to Dead Years. But I am a descendant of Dr. Alfred Earl Dudding, who came to this country from England in 1650. They settled on the Potomac, where Washington, D.C. now stands. The Capitol grounds was known as Duddington Pastures.
Huh.
That's pretty good.
Huh.
Yeah, my house is on it. That's the White House. And this is where I put it all together. If you wanted a copy of what I did for just the Neptune history itself, I put it in a PDF form and had it reviewed. And there's a copy of it here at the archives, or I'd send you one. Pretty much everything that we saw here, with the exception the Neptune hardly shows up in any of the Sanborn maps because it was always on the outskirts of town. The city never expanded enough. But after the Neptune closed down, I can't remember what year this is from, but this shows a little bit of structure that was left over after the mine had closed down. And this is the original claim for the Neptune itself, where it shows the two shafts that we saw earlier on the aerial, and Missoula Gulch coming down, and the Bernard Placer claim that splits it. And as another result, I think I'm one of the only people that can look at these old claim maps and know right where their house sits.
Is that placer over the top of yours or under?
Over the top. And I'm not exactly sure how
The
that works.
Neptune came first and then the placer?
No, the Placer would have been there first, so I'm not.
So the Neptune went over the top of the placer?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I don't know what the nuances are between the I don't know.
Well, you got,
Surface rights for so far and
yeah,
underground rights.
you got placer and quartz load, so the ground one was a quartz load and the other one's a placer, but I don't know how they
I'm
were
not
able to
sure
go
either.
over the top or whatever they did there.
My surveyor didn't have a whole lot of help on that either. Any questions?
So where are you on this map then? Trying to get oriented.
I am right there.
Oh, there, okay, okay.
I took that photograph this spring from a helicopter.
Ah,
We were on our way downstream.
you hired a helicopter just to do this presentation.
Can you believe it?
Oh, that's so good of you.
Circle around for hours.
Google Earth might work.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
A lot cheaper.
good question.
I just have a couple of questions. Where did you find the notice of location that you showed?
Notice of location.
Which one was that?
That was near the beginning, before the abstract of your title.
This one.
Oh, further on,
I can't even see my mouse. Come on.
Top left corner.
Oh, it's slow as why.
Oh, it won't come down?
No. Oh, wait. Sorry.
it's okay.
There we go.
There we go.
This one?
Yes,
That, I'm fortunate enough to have the abstract to the house.
okay.
And Yeah, it
That
is.
was in your abstract?
Yes.
In the original abstract,
In your
right?
original?
Yes.
And you got both of those when you bought the house?
Yeah, I was just lucky that it has stayed there and has stayed there through all the owners in pretty good condition too.
Yeah,
Yeah, when you
'cause-
flip through that thing, every one of them look like that.
Awesome.
And the
'Cause
only
I-
map that shows up is the one right at the beginning that has a little bit of the lot itself where the Neptune comes in.
I think now they only go back to like 50 years or something. For some reason, they only go back to a certain point. You don't get the
All of it.
entire history that goes back to the beginning of Montana.
Okay.
But we have those. So not for everybody, but we do have a lot of abstracts here.
Oh, that's
You
nice to
have a
know.
lot of the notice of location abstracts.
I assume they're in the abstract of titles that
Yeah,
goes
if you
all the way
had-
back to the beginning of Montana. Yeah.
If you had to compile it yourself, you'd be in the big land records book, and you'd grab each one of those two numbers, and out come the big books, and
So it's courthouse reminds me.
yeah,
Okay.
they're really good. They're really good to work with. And
Yeah.
I can be persistent. They were awful patient with me.
And the Montrose edition plat map, did you get that from the Bureau of Mining and Geology?
I got that from Chad Ball. That one's Dan Brown. For some reason he had a copy of her. Some of his handwritten notes are on there. I asked him if he wanted
We
it back.
might-
He said no. So.
Yeah. We might have that one too. I don't know.
Thanks, you guys.
Dave?
Oh.
Logan, now that you've warmed up with this, what next? You gonna be doing more with Tony Rock?
I haven't thought a lot with Tony. What I wanted to do, I have family ties on my mom's side, clear back to the 1880s south of Butte, and I've only found a couple of instances for it so far, records, but they're either ranches, dairies, or farms, Masons and the Fishers, and they were my great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents that I was wanting to piece that together to see if I can't find some more information on that, but
That
do you
would
have
be
ideas
good.
for me?
I'm thinking that Jim McCarthy has all this whole Anaconda Copper Mining Company underground stuff in the vaults that needs some mining expertise to look at.
I love
I
that.
would love that. Yeah, massive amount of mining research.
You know, I'm off on Fridays. Let me know when you're ready.
No, but I like that idea of the south down, like in the south end of the Butte, because we haven't had a lot of people talking about that area.
It is hard to find.
Yeah.
I found the Mason Ranch shows up in a surface waters book when I was doing something completely different, where the first time it pokes up, and I've only been able to find the Fisher last name being in town trying to sell something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where what I'd like to do is go further back in the land records and get the original property before they went out and subdivided it.
Yeah.
It might be a tall task. I think it might be over in Deer Lodge for that too. So another thing, a lot of records are over there as well because we haven't always been in Silver Bow County.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't made my way to Deer Lodge quite yet. Another thing that was interesting for me, this day and age in Facebook and everybody having tabs on you, taking pictures of yourself, and everybody's worried about the government. They had more tabs on you back in the 1880s. I'm reading through these newspaper articles, and
Yeah.
so-and-so Jessie Adams from Opportunity, she's come to stay in Butte at this address, at this boarding house, and so-and-so's washing her dog and cats while this person's in. I'm like, God. People get married on Diamond Street, and who was there, what they had to eat, and who crashed the parties.
Yeah.
It was just like it is today, except now you just made it easier. Back then they had to dig for the dirt, I guess, but I was just impressed with how much information they knew about you at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And the fight in the newspapers too, that's
Mm-hmm.
propaganda. Well, Joe, we wanted to go back and look at put it back to where I keep bringing it in.
There, yeah.
That took me forever. That took a couple of trips up on the end taking pictures.
Is that how you did?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks good. How'd you get your angles right?
I really didn't. Some of them are really off. I was trying to go off of the school here. That kind of helped out. And this house down here, that one still stands. I'm going to take it away. So those are my two guides. but some of them are off too.
Looks
That's,
really good.
well, and that was a shake that came in Microsoft, so as soon as I made it all wonky and I got it to fit, so you notice I cut my house off, but after it was all fit, I was leaving. So somebody in Photoshop could do some really neat stuff.
Go back one more time. Okay, so yeah, really the low part of the gulch is what they really filled in.
Yeah, at least for that area.
Uh-huh.
And it's 1910, they might have been filling it in actively, I don't.
But that was really bad. Where'd you say Downey Road was?
Driscoll?
Downey's Driscoll, yes.
So it's just right behind it.
Oh, okay, so
Here.
I can see where Excel is.
That's the building for it, and that is the same building.
So what is underneath all that fill? Is that where the Presbyterian church is on the corner there?
No,
At
we
the
don't.
base of that?
That's-
Oh, I don't think we quite go that far out.
Yeah.
Maybe over there.
Yeah, we'd be a lot further out this way. This is probably just still more neighborhood. It might be parking lot, right?
That's acres there.
Acres.
There's acres on the corner,
IGA.
right there.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could explain all the cracks in the buildings around there.
That's right. I appreciate everybody coming out. Listen, I bug people for information.
Thank you.
Yeah.